Hi, and welcome to the closing ceremonies for the Permanent Peoples Tribunal Session on Human Rights, Fracking, and Climate Change. My name is Carly Lettero with the Spring Creek Project for Ideas, Nature, and the Written Word at Oregon State University. It's been an honor to co-organize and co-host the tribunal. On behalf of the Spring Creek Project, I want to thank everyone who came forward to courageously tell their stories for the tribunal. Some of those stories are archived in the online sessions that we recorded this week, but many more of those stories are archived in the documents that the attorneys provided for the judges, in addition to the spoken testimony this week. I would also like to thank the attorneys who donated their time and wisdom and expertise this week and in the months and years leading up to the tribunal. And special thanks to Tom Kearns, who, with his colleagues, first proposed this session of the tribunal and ushered it along for years and years until it finally happened this week. Thanks to Gianni Tognoni, who's the Secretary General of the Permanent Peoples Tribunal, and to Simona Fraudutario, who's the coordinator of the Permanent Peoples Tribunal in Rome, Italy. Zoom Video Communications donated the software that we used to record the tribunal this week. And special thanks to Shelley Stonebrook, who is the program coordinator with Spring Creek Project. She graciously worked with every single person who presented this week to make sure that they were comfortable with the online platform. Thanks also to Emily Grubby, who is the intern with Spring Creek Project, who very thoughtfully and quickly edited every single session of the tribunal that we recorded so that we could put it online to share with you as it was happening. And thanks to the graduate students in the Environmental Arts and Humanities program here at Oregon State University who helped to organize the tribunal for the year leading up to it. So while this session of the tribunal has come to a close, it is far from the end. I want to thank the judges who watched the tribunal online and offline this week and who are going to spend the next few weeks deliberating and reading through all of the written documentation that was submitted. They are going to write a judicial opinion sometime over the next month, and as soon as that opinion is done, we will make it public. All of the videos from the tribunal are going to be archived on the Spring Creek Project YouTube page, also on the Fracking Tribunal website, which is tribunalonfracking.org, and ultimately they will be archived on the Spring Creek Project website at Oregon State University. So now on to the closing remarks. First, we will be joined by Gianni Tognoni, who I mentioned is the Secretary General of the Permanent Peoples Tribunal. And then we'll hear a poem by writer Mark Trechock from Dickerson State University, who will read his piece, Down the River, that was published in the anthology Fracture, Essays, Poems, and Stories on Fracking in America. And then we'll hear from Kathleen Dean Moore, who will share some closing remarks. She is a distinguished professor of philosophy emerita at Oregon State University and author of Great Tide Rising, among other books. And finally, we'll close the session with a song that was written and composed for the tribunal by Jan Michael Lookingwolf, who is an enrolled member of the Kalapuya Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde and a world-renowned Native American flute player. Thanks so much for joining us.
Okay, those are few closing remarks by Simona Fraudataria and myself as Secretariat of the Permanent Peoples Tribunal. They are obviously not pretending to represent the advisory opinion, which is the exclusive role of the component of the jury. The comments which follow are meant to provide a first focus on the overall experience and evidences of all what has been accumulating over the last 4 days of reports, data, and even more importantly, on the testimonies of the community of the various continents who have represented more vividly the dramatic significance of the question which is at the center of the title of this session: the impacts on human rights of fracking and of one of its main consequences, the climate changes. It will be the panel of judges that over the next few weeks, or depending on the availability of all the documents, will provide an advisory opinion. For the time being, we are trying to give our impressions, which are based also on the implicit comparison of the importance, reliability, significance of what has been presented here with other sessions which have explored different issues and a different context. So the first observation is that the impacts in so many dramatic modalities have been documented with a richness of facts and related oral, visual, juridical, cultural evidences, which definitely coincide with a scenario of violations which, beyond any reasonable doubt, require an urgent qualification in terms of responsibility to be ascertained and attributed, as well as of measures which must be assumed to avoid an irreversible worsening of the already dramatic situation, and to allow policies of reparation of changes of practices. What has become further clear is the fact that fracking is, with important but limited exception, and still ongoing and expanding reality, which affect both the rights of nature as well as the individuals and community in all the countries which are being considered by the Permanent Peoples Tribunal, with a specifically dramatic consequences on indigenous people. The practices of resistance, of research, of resilience, which have been presented, underline on the other side that the violation of rights are most of the times planned and implemented intentionally and are further denied or hidden. The existing absence of ad hoc clear legislations is not recognized as a vacuum to be urgently corrected, but as an excuse to go ahead in a regime of impunity. The scenarios of fracking appear in this sense an exemplary model of the tragic broader geopolitical policies and strategies which consider and impose an inverse hierarchy of values between human and people's rights and economic and environmental powers. The work of the PPT oriented to provide propositive, not simply descriptive answer to the four main questions which have guided the preparation and implementation of this session, will certainly aim at exploring and judging responsibility of causes and actors of the violation, but at the same time will concentrate the attention on three aspects. First, the possible ways of strengthening the role of the communities who must remain and be further recognized as the main subjects of inviolable rights and of their self-determination. Second, the focus will be on the needed evolution of existing international, national, local instruments towards an innovative role of guarantors of the right of affected and threatened human community and of nature. The third, the promotion of broader and effective networks of community, political community actors capable of transforming the present very rich but fragmented and disparate experiences of resistance and resilience into a transversal people fighting for the combined respect and promotion of the old but fundamental Human Declaration of Human Rights and of the so-called new Universal Declaration of Rights of Mother Earth. At last but not least comment. The event of this session of the Permanent Peoples Tribunal has been an experiment of collaboration and communication, which has been decided to overcome the economic constraints which impede what should be a permanent, timely exercise of assessing, monitoring, reversing the universe of violation which occur in the present global scenarios, where the decisions on policies which go against the fundamental rights of nature and of human community are taken, imposed, and directed centrally with unlimited resources. The experiment has been made a success with some inevitable but instructive limitations, thanks to the commitment of a group of promoters which deserve the recognition and the gratitude not only nor principally of the Permanent Peoples Tribunal, but of all those who could transform this experiment into a flexible, powerful, permanent tool which could allow also the struggles of the community of the world to become more globally and timely known, shared, and effective. Thank you.
I'm Mark Trechock. I'm reading the poem Down the Road, which appeared in the anthology Fracture, Essays, Poems, and Stories on Fracking in America. Down the road, heading west on the interstate, through oil country toward Montana, passing the ground laid bare for Best Buy and newcomers' condominiums, whose prices will rival Manhattan until the next bust and evacuation. For whatever boom comes then, uranium or gravel or fresh water, to whatever unsuspecting place. Passing the oil trucks headed to the Bakken, the dual-wheeled pickups and company logos and license plates from far away. Passing the 8-acre scoria pad cut out of a wheat field to accommodate the drilling rig and its odor of fracking fluids. The pad not likely to go back to wheat in the farmer's lifetime or his heirs. Passing the grain elevator they want to tear down for a place to deliver fracking chemicals. Passing the sign, a shade the color of a tree trunk, welcoming us to the national park. Passing descendants of Coronado's horses, never packed, never ridden. Looking down from a bluff, passing a wing-like metal fabrication, churning west on a wide load semi, destined, we speculate, for an Oregon wind farm. Passing wheel after wheel after wheel, whose contact with the pavement produces the insistent chant, gotta move, gotta move, gotta move.
And so we come to the end of a week-long tribunal on fracking, climate change, and human rights. What we have learned has been terrifying and empowering, infuriating and uplifting, tedious and electrifying, disgraceful and full of grace. What a week, right smack in the center of what I believe is the most critically important decade in the history of life on Earth, where civilization will either imagine into existence a just and fruitful way forward, or we will watch planetary and human systems fray, fragment, and fall apart. Imagine. Let us stop to think about the paradoxical place where we are at the end of the tribunal. So here we are in my garden. You may hear birds. You'll probably hear motorcycles. The birds will be evening grosbeaks. I don't know what the motorcycles are. We all live in Earth's garden, where evolution has achieved its greatest fullness of flowering. I'm quoting theologian Thomas Berry. It's the most lyric period in Earth history, the time of thrush song and 30,000 species of orchids, microscopic sea angels with tiny wings, and whales who teach each other to sing. It's a time of birdsong and other astonishments that have evolved over 4 billion years. And the greatest astonishment of all, the human species, which has the ability to turn, awe-stricken, to the night sky and imagine its own beginnings and its own end. And yet, governments, in collusion with the oil and gas industry, are rapidly taking steps to give away this world, this lovely world, to the planet's 93 crude oil billionaires, enriching them beyond the cruelest pharaohs. It's our generation that's witnessing the end of the era we evolved in. That's Thomas Berry again. My generation has done what no previous generation could do because they lack the technological power, and what no future generation will be able to do because the planet will never again be so beautiful or abundant. In my lifetime, because of fossil fuel-driven climate change, fossil fuel-enabled habitat destruction, fossil fuel-driven agricultural expansion, and fossil fuel-based agriculture and other assorted poisons, 39% of terrestrial wildlife is gone. 39% of marine wildlife is gone. 76% of freshwater wildlife gone, 76%. The greatest extinctions are in the poor countries, with losses of 58%, where the wealthy countries are outsourcing their environmental destruction. Let's think also of the extinction of homelands, Bangladeshi deltas, Alaskan coastal villages, Micronesian villages sinking under the rising seas. Here we are in a garden. You may hear laughing children, although we've tried to corral them. There is my young grandson Theo, who wants to be an engineer for Lego Company when he grows up. His little brother Lem, who wants to be a deep-sea biologist. And Zoe, who imagines herself working in a pet store when she grows up, among the kittens and the snakes. All the imagined futures, all the dreams. And yet, a new extreme extraction technique, hydraulic fracturing, is flooding the atmosphere with greenhouse gases 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide, accelerating climate change. And I hear this always in my mind, a statement by 500 scientists led by a team from Stanford. Unless all nations take immediate action on climate change, by the time today's children are middle-aged, the life support systems of the planet will be irretrievably damaged. Irretrievably. From the French, retrouver. So, never to be found again. Of course I'm afraid for the children, and my little biologist probing a sour, scoured sea. In countries around the world, global warming has begun. In northern Africa, disastrous flooding, so mothers have to sleep standing up to keep their babies' heads above water. In East Africa, drought so severe that crops die on the vine, and 12 million people are in terrible need of food. Children, the little ones, especially susceptible to spreading infectious diseases from foul water and insect vectors, thirsty children dreaming of gardens. The planet balances here, now, between two possible futures. Earth, this beautiful blue marble in absolute balance, trembles there, with wind singing across its gardens. It could roll either way, the planet and the children head over heels. In this context, in this place, in this time, we gathered to consider fracking, the new engine of the U.S. energy revolution, a technology that has increased oil and gas production faster than at any time in United States history. 510,000 fracking wells, producing more than half of U.S. crude oil and 2/3 of the natural gas, 13,000 new wells per year. A technology racing ahead, far outpacing the legal regulations or the moral outrage that might control it. This flood of cheap energy could not have come at a worse time in planetary history. What happens next is largely a function of the choices we make aiming civilization toward the aspirational goals of international human and earth rights, or surrendering to the power of the self-enriching corporations, or to the allure of fossil fuel-powered life, the easy life, the end game. We are in terrible moral peril that we might let this world slip away. Imagine. I think of Erica Jong, who wrote, "In my dreams, the angel shrugged and said, if we fail this time, it will be a failure of the imagination." And then she placed the world gently in the palm of my hand. So, let us turn to the good work of imagining. Let us imagine two futures, one in which human and earth rights are fully respected, and one in which the rights are trampled by huge amounts of money invested in crimes that are dug into the very structure of the land, a tangled wellhead of fearful politicians, reckless corporations, and bewildered children. Let's look at these two possible futures. First, let's tell the story of a future without human rights enforcement. In this scenario, internationally recognized human and earth rights are simply ignored. They are, the argument goes, trumped by the corporation's right to make a profit. The immediate result is that, unimpeded by law or conscience, wells spread across the land and profits soar. This wealth creates a lively market in legislators, judges, and regulators, all happy to sell their consciences and their votes for oil money. In this first story, the level of corruption is staggering enough that citizens have to prod themselves to remember that paying piles of cash for votes is called bribery, and it's a betrayal of the public trust. And if it weren't for Citizens United court case, it would also be a felony. In this story, federal energy policy is quickly transferred to the hands of the fossil fuel corporations. It is now government of, by, and for the corporations, a corporatocracy, thuggish petrostate. Now the greatest transfer of public lands and public wealth into the hands of gas and oil companies proceeds apace, as drills move into cherished indigenous land and into the once protected lands of public parks, forests, grasslands, farms, and neighborhoods. The effect on human health is immediately measurable. There are cancer zones that map exactly onto the fracking fields, which at first map exactly onto poor and minority communities. Asthma, neurological disorders, skin rashes increase, birth weights decrease. The costs are borne by the victims, never by the corporation or the state. Water and air pollution follows fracking wherever it goes. Abandoned wells leak methane. Chemicals leak into groundwater. Chemicals leak into surface water. Pipelines leak, corrode, spill, and explode. Gradually, the cancer zones radiate from the wells following the pipelines, just as cancer cells follow the blood. To consolidate their power, the corporations fight against the most powerful opponent they might ever face, which is knowledge. Four traditional sources of knowledge, the pride of civilization, come under relentless attack: science, universities, free press, and the courts. Their weapons are silencing: scrubbed websites, demoted scientists, canceled research, non-disclosure agreements; purchasing: university professorships and research centers, hired guns who plant false stories, bribes of every sort; deception; and threats to homes and livelihoods. In this first story, activists who seek and share information are charged under new laws that allow a person who aids, advises, counsels, or conspires with someone who damages a pipeline to be charged with a felony and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Sometimes, absent any human rights, murder is the preferred way to silence a critic. Citizens who know only one fact, their stress and their pain, are ridiculed, isolated, and threatened. In this story, as the methane leaks without restraint, global warming accelerates, as do its effects on people's homelands. Driven from the lands by drought, driven from their homes by flood, Driven from their cities by unbearable heat stress, people are on the move with no possible place to go and no redress. There are no rights for refugees. That's the first story, and I've got to stop. I don't know how to write this. Do I use past tense because these things have already happened? Do I use the present tense because this story is unfolding today? Do I use future tense because without effective protection of human rights, they will continue to occur? What is the verb tense for, dear God, this cannot be allowed to happen? So let's start over. Now we're going to do a different thought experiment. Now let's imagine a story of a future with full protection of human and earth rights. In this story, the government's commitment to rights serves as a powerful restraint on the fossil fuel industry's freedom to defile. At first, the fossil fuel industry does its level best to use hydraulic fracturing in as careful a way as possible, developing technologies, siting wells, and disposing of waste in ways that are expensive but fully respect the rights of health to people and biota, to self-determination, and to the free enjoyment of property. And in this second story, let us assume also that the protection of the right to know is a high priority for government. Now I'm quoting, "A responsibility of every American citizen to each other is to preserve and protect our freedom by recognizing what truth is and is not, what a fact is and is not, and begin by holding ourselves accountable to truthfulness and demand that our pursuit of America's future be fact-based." Who said that? I never thought I would be quoting Rex Tillerson, the former CEO of ExxonMobil, former Secretary of State. When his advice is followed, as it is in this alternative story, much becomes clear about the fracking technology. The salient fact is that it seems to be impossible to pour poisons onto the ground, impossible to move methane thousands of miles, impossible to release toxins into the air to be filtered by the lungs of children and songbirds, with the assurance that human and earth rights will not be violated. And at this point in this story, the precautionary principle kicks in. If your primary obligation is to honor the rights of life, health, and so on, and if you simply do not know enough about the chemistry of toxins, the geology of wells, the fittings of the pipes, to be even a little bit sure they are safe, then the rational, and in this imaginary setting, the legal thing to do is to not proceed. Now, things are getting really expensive for the fracking industry. Delay costs a fortune. And now gas and oil cost a whole lot of money, far more than solar panels and wind turbines or agricultural methane capture and tidal power. It's a powerful incentive for industry to find more reliable sources of income. And off we go into the future with the monkey off our back and the whole realm of possibility ahead of us. The point is that there are two paths here. We have learned that we can see quite a way down those two different roads. It's not as though the path is obscured by fog or distance. We know the consequences of turning one way or another. What the tribunal will do is to show us which path the collective moral wisdom of the planet would have us choose. The other point I want to make with these two stories is about the transformative power of a human rights narrative. Once you start looking at the world through the lenses of human and earth rights, you will see a quite different prospect. Here again, the tribunal is an exceptional opportunity to imagine a world very different from our own, an aspirational world, a world that calls us to our better, more discerning, and more empowered selves. Which leads me to say one more thing about rights. Throughout the tribunal, we have affirmed human rights and we have affirmed earth rights. But there's a set of rights we haven't talked about, a set of rights that hovers over us like a nervous angel. These are the rights of future generations. What are our responsibilities to those who will come after us, the children of all species, desperately imperiled by the corporate plunder of the planet? What do we owe the future? Surely this. Future beings have a right to a world as rich in possibilities as the world that was left to us. At a bare minimum, the material conditions for ongoing life. A world with fresh water to drink, fresh air to breathe, clean food to eat, the minimum. and then birdsong to delight in, safe homes to return to at night, dreams that might come true, not just for people, but for the towering trees and the cowering owls. Why do we have this duty to the new ones? Because they are the very definition of innocent, and every single blow and shout and shiver of fear that rains down on them is utterly undeserved and unfair and unwarranted. Those words are Brian Doyle's. And I would add, because we promise the new ones. Every parent holds a newborn life in her arms, and she whispers, I will care for you. I will give you the world. Whatever is left of the planet when the pillage ends, that's the world that future beings will live in. Whatever genetic lines, whatever possibilities are left, that's what evolution has to work with. Future beings have a right to more than what's left scattered and torn on the table after the great cosmic going out of business sale. The planet, so gentle to life, picked over and storm-torn. How can the future beings deserve any less than what we ask for ourselves? Philosophers say you can't talk intelligently about the rights of future generations because you don't know what they will want. That is simply not true. Maybe we don't know whether they'll want electric cars or jet packs, apples or protein pops, whatever. But there's one fact about the desires of future beings that we cannot deny, and that is the fact of the urgent press towards ongoing life. I struggle to make this case, so forgive me, but consider, I love my grandchildren more than I love my own life. They are the manifestation of life ongoing. That love is intense, ferocious, and all-consuming. And when I think about other people all around the world, I assume, I know, that they love the future that is manifest in their children with an equal intensity. And then I think of all the plants and animals that shiver with the urgency of reproduction and life ongoing in the rotting log, life in the deepest sea, ongoing life in bedrock and hot springs. The urge towards life has to be the strongest force on the planet. On a warm, humid day, the air fairly buzzes with it. So I know this about present life. Life wants to live. And I know this about future lives. They too will want the possibility for full life, for full manifestation of potential, for growth and change, for continuing. And this is the authenticity of natural rights, that they echo, they amplify the trembling urgency of life ongoing. Surely these future generations, only imagined, deserve a planet as rich in the possibility of ongoing life as our own. This is what we must protect fiercely and faithfully for all time. So I send thanks to the witnesses, all the courageous truth tellers, the organizers, and the judges. May you find wisdom and courage to match the challenges of the time. On the reeling planet that we hold in our hands, may gentle rain fall forever on green hills. May ice return to glaze the bays. May people speak without fear and dream of the future. May salmon endlessly return when sandpipers call. And may the children hum themselves to sleep in the safe and sustaining night.